belongs to Judah. Today I show loyalty to the house of Saul, your father, to his brothers, and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hand of David. And you charge me today with a fault concerning this woman? They're saying, the only reason why you're on the throne is me, right? And so he's trying to push his authority there. Now, may God do so to Abner, and more also if I do not do for David as the Lord has sworn to him. And so here we see, this is the time, this is the opportunity he's going to take now to go to David's side. Okay? And to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba. And he could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. This is Ishbosheth. And then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to David, saying, whose is the land? Saying also, make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel to you. And David said, good, I will make a covenant with you. And so this is David and Abner. Think about it. Now see, this is again the wisdom of David though. See, David in his heart, he was never an enemy of Abner. He was never an enemy of Saul. He could have been. Saul was an enemy of David, right? Saul saw David as his enemy, but David didn't see Saul as his enemy. And so David said, good, I will make a covenant with you. But one thing I require of you, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. Remember, because David went out in battle and killed all these Philistines there, that Saul promised his daughter. But then when Saul got jealous of David, right, he gave his daughter to somebody else. Now, it's not like David doesn't lack wives, huh? So we see, this is not a perfect man, right? So he wants another wife. And again, a lot of it could be political, but it's sin, right? It could be political, right? But this is the daughter of Saul, right? So he's bringing in these different wives to kind of put his stamp of authority. But this is not right. And it's against Deuteronomy 17, verse 17. God specifically said to the kings, do not multiply wives. And so David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. And then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. So Abner said to him, go, return. And he returned. So Abner ordered this, right? And so basically she was taken from her husband and brought to David. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, in time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. And then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. And so Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron. And David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And then Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Okay, so the covenant, David sees this as God, delivering the kingdom into his hand, right? It's not he had to battle for it. He didn't have to fight his countrymen for it, right? And that's the interesting thing. David never fights with Israel, right? He allows the Lord to deliver it into his hand. And so this is what he sees happen here. Now, what's going to prevent this is Joab, right? This is David's general, okay? And this is what we're going to see in the next section here. It says, at that moment, the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. And when Joab and all the troops that were with him had come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he sent him away, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away, and he has already gone? Surely you realize that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, to know You're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing. And when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know it. And so Joab said, why didn't you deal with him? Right? He's our enemy. David made a covenant with him. Now David sees the Lord assembling the kingdom, right, of Israel, all of it. But Joab sees this as kind of a trick, right? And so Joab's going to go out and he's going to take matters into his own hand. Verse 27 says, so now when Abner had returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Who's Asahel? Remember, Asahel was, remember when they had that MMA kind of smackdown there? Last week we said they had the guys of Joab and the guys of Abner. They were on either side of the pool and they had it out, right? And then Joab and his men, or the southern tribe, started to win. They started to pursue Abner. And remember Asahel, which is fleet of foot. Remember, he was a brother of Joab. He started to catch up with Abner. And then Abner said, hey, turn aside. I'm going to take you out. And he wouldn't turn aside, and so he killed him, right? And so Joab is bringing revenge on him. Now, I want you to note this. It's interesting. Hebron is actually a sanctuary city. Isn't that interesting? What happens in sanctuary cities? Can't do it. Very good, man. Very good, Isaac. I can tell you're tracking with me because he can't do it, right? So Joab, he's breaking the law here. And notice he gets him out the gate. And so we're going to see a little bit later, David, he says, you know, man, Joab, I don't know what to do with you, basically, because of this kind of acts that he does. He's breaking the law here. And it's interesting that probably what Joab is thinking is that I'm the avenger of my brother's blood. You know, the avenger there? But he can't do it in that city, that sanctuary city. But he tricks Joab, right? He gets him to stand right at the gate, and then he takes him out. Right? And he does this all without letting David know. Okay? So there's a lot going on. The reason I mention this is that David had a difficult time with Joab. I mean, he was a good general, but he was, you know, he was hard to handle. And David didn't even want to deal with him. Actually, as he got older, he said, Solomon, you deal with him. He's old now. It's very interesting as we kind of trace through the history here. He had a hard time managing Joab. And so it's kind of interesting to kind of read between the lines. Verse 28, afterward, when David heard it, he said, my kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab one who has a discharge or is a leper, who leans on a staff or falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. And so he pronounces basically this curse on Joab and his descendants. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. Now it's interesting here, the rest of chapter 3, we're going to see David even mourns for Abner, and he can't even eat. Now this, again, was a man that was the general of Saul, who was trying to kill David all those years. So isn't that interesting? David's heart. It's not just he's pretending, oh, this is what I should do. David's heart is very interesting. And as I read you those passages from Romans and Hebrews, Romans 12 verses 17 through 21, and Hebrews chapter 12 verse 14, it's almost like that spiritual principle is written on David's heart, isn't it? The vengeance is the Lord's, not his. He's going to allow the Lord to bring the kingdom into his hand. And so it's interesting. He mourns for Abner. It's in his very being there. And remember how he mourned for Saul and Jonathan. Now, you can understand him mourning for Jonathan, but remember when we found out Saul, he mourned for them. There wasn't that hatred. He didn't understand why Saul wanted to kill him. Why are you chasing the flea in the wilderness? But he loved Saul, right? And so it's just a very interesting kind of place that David has with the Lord. His heart for the Lord. Then David, verse 31. Then David, verse 31, said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn for Abner. And King David followed the coffin. And so they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king sang a lament over Abner and said, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, nor your feet put into fetters. You didn't die a hero's death," he's saying. "As a man falls before wicked men, so you fell." And then all the people wept over him again. And when all the people came to persuade David to eat food while it was still day, David took an oath, saying, "God, do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down." Now all the people took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner the son of Ner. Then the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me." Now he's talking about Abner and Abner's brother. Right? He says, "These guys are too hard. I can't handle them." Right? Because they're the sons of Zeruiah. Right? And Asahel was the wild brother that got killed. All right? And so he says, these sons of Zeruiah are too harsh for me. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. Well, what David says is that, God, I'm going to let God take care of them. Isn't that interesting? Right? And so I wanted to read this. This is a comment by Pastor Chuck as well. And he says, God will deal with it. And he says, Joab and his brothers were powerful soldiers, but they kept doing horrible things. They were not really controllable by David, although they were an asset to him militarily. After Joab killed Abner, David mourned, but didn't know how to deal with Joab. He said, I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. And then Pastor Chuck writes this, it is good to know that when we find ourselves in a situation that is too tough for us, we can turn it over to the Lord, and he will handle it. I can't handle it, the Lord will take care of it. Later, before David died, he instructed Solomon to get rid of Joab. Isn't that interesting? By that time, Joab was much older, and Solomon was young, and God used him to deal with Joab. And you see this with David. You see some of David's weaknesses. He couldn't deal with discipline sometimes. It's interesting. And he couldn't discipline his own children. And that's how his children got out of hand. And so it's interesting. He's not a perfect man, but he's a man after God's own heart. And even here you see David's heart. I really can't deal with these men. These men are too crazy, basically. They're good soldiers, but I can't deal with them. And he says the Lord will deal with them. It's very interesting to take in, to look at that. All right, so let's look at chapter 4, verse 1. I think I'm just going to do chapter 4, and we'll close there. We'll see. All right, so when Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart. This would be the one that's in power there, Ishbosheth. And now Saul's son had two men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other Rahab. The sons of Rimmon and the Beerothite, of the children of Benjamin. I want you to know that they're the children of Benjamin, okay? Okay, these ones. For Beeroth was also part of Benjamin, because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have been sojourners there until this day. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened as she made haste to flee that he fell and became lame in his feet. And his name was Mephibosheth. So he was 5 when this happened. It's been about 7 years now that David's been kind of reigning, because we're going to see in chapter 5, 7.5 years later, he's going to take the reign of all of Israel, right? So at this point here, between chapters 4 and 5, Mephibosheth is about 12 years old. Okay, I want you to note that. And after the chapter 4, he's going to be the only surviving son of Saul, basically, that can assume any kind of power. Now, think about this. In a regular kind of, I think, battle for the throne, usually what they do is they get rid of all the ones that they're enemies, right? David. But see, remember, Saul is not his enemy. But if David would do what everybody else does, he would get rid of what? Ishbosheth and Mephibosheth. But he doesn't. So I want you to note this, okay? And so verse 5 says, Then the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab, the Baanah, set out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was lying on his bed at noon. And they came there all the way into the house as though to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. For when they came into the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. Then they struck him and killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. Now, what do you think David's going to do? Now, you would think, right, if you didn't know David and his history, you would think, well, David, hey, that's a good job. Now I can assume the throne. But he doesn't. He doesn't. Okay? And so they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, Here's the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy. Wrong. Saul is not David's enemy. Who sought your life, and the Lord has avenged my Lord, the king, this day of Saul and his descendants. So they took matters in their own hands, and they're presuming that we're doing the Lord's work. David, look, the Lord has avenged your enemy through our hands. So what are they after? Maybe kind of some to be lifted up, maybe be put in some kind of power position in David's army there. That's what they're thinking, right? Now, look what David does. But David answered Rechab and Baanah, his brother, the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and said to them, As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity. When someone told me, saying, Look, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag, the one who thought I would give him a reward for his sins. Remember that Amalekite. Okay, and so can you imagine what these guys are thinking now? I shouldn't have done that. Right? But notice these two gentlemen, they're Benjamites. They killed another Benjamite, Ishbosheth, right? Saul was a Benjamite. You see, there's just kind of a vileness there, right? And so what David says, I'm going to take you out. Basically, this is what we're going to see. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house on his bed? Therefore, shall I not now require his blood at your hand and remove you from the earth? And so David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pole of Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. And so at this point, Ishbosheth is gone, right? There's no other son but Mephibosheth, who's only 12 years old, and he's lame. So what's going to happen? Now, did David set war against the house of Saul at any time? No, he never what? He never put out his hand against. You see, if God be for us, who can be against us, right? Allowing the what? Vengeance is the Lord's. You see that principle that David had written on his heart? He didn't have to lift up a sword at all. Actually, he loved Saul, and he loved Saul's family. And we're going to see that, later on, about a handful of chapters later, when David has united the kingdom, the first thing he's going to do is, is there anyone in the house of Saul that I can bless? He's going to remember his oath to Jonathan. And we're going to see Mephibosheth comes there, and every night from that point on, Mephibosheth eats at the king's table. You see, Saul was never his enemy, and so we see this principle. Vengeance is the Lord. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to raise my hand against God's anointed. God lifts up men, and God he brings them down. Right? I'm going to serve the Lord. Now I'm just going to read the first 5 verses of chapter 5. And then we'll close there, okay? It says, Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, saying, Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, You were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord said to you, you shall shepherd my people, Israel, and be ruler over Israel. So they've changed their tune, okay? Now that Ishbosheth is gone and Abner is gone, and so they say, oh, you know, we've always wanted to serve you, David. That's what they're saying, okay? Therefore, all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. All right, so he's been king for 7.5 years of Judah. Now he's king over Israel. So verse 4, David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. So he reigned until he was 70 years. Now the reason I want to read this to you is that you can start to get your chronology in order there. David, he started to reign at 30 years old. Now, when was he anointed king? 1 Samuel chapter 16. He was anointed king right around 15 years old. All right, so it's been 15 years he was chased from Saul. At 30 years, he became king of Judah, but then at 37 and a half, he assumed the entire nation there, okay? In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Okay, so that gives us kind of that time marker. Man, there's a couple great comments. I'm not, gosh. I'll read that next week. We go over. Pastor Jack, he has some really good, insightful comments, which we'll read next week. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, thank you for your word tonight, Lord. May you be glorified just through these principles in your word, Lord. Such great application, Lord, to allow. Vengeance is yours, Lord, to allow you to go before us, to wait on the Lord. And so, Lord, I just pray that you teach us, Lord, these principles here. To trust you, Lord. To trust you to orchestrate things. Oh, Lord, we don't have to break the law. We don't have to do things. We don't have to sin, Lord, to defend ourselves or to try to achieve the outcome we think it should be, Lord. Lord, you're on the throne. You're sovereign. If God be for us, who can be against us? Truly, Lord, vengeance is yours. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay. Oh, Lord, we read that scripture, we know deep down in our hearts it's true. It's just oftentimes difficult to exercise. Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Oh, that's our great desire, Lord, as people would see you. And just as the writer of the Hebrews just so wonderfully articulates, is as we pursue peace and holiness, people see the Lord, they're changed. And so help us, I pray. So unto us this principle, Lord. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Shall we stand? For thou, O Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted far above all gods. For thou, O Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted far above all gods. We exalt thee, we exalt thee, we exalt thee, O Lord. We exalt thee, we exalt thee, we exalt thee, O Lord. All right, God bless you.